Welcome to Lesson 12, Subtracting Decimals. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to subtract decimals, much like you learned how to add decimals in the previous lesson. You will often see the word difference used in subtraction questions, and that word difference tells you that you need to subtract the numbers. So in this case, we are subtracting 54 and 49 hundredths minus 3 and 876 thousandths. So just like in the previous lesson, you need to first line up the decimal points. So go ahead and write the question with the first number on top of the other. Come back when you're ready. So this is the way you should have lined up your numbers, with the decimal points lined up. This part of the question might look a little bit scary to you, and a lot of students are tempted just to drop down the 6, but that is incorrect. You cannot do that because there is an invisible 0 here which you can add. Remember, you can always add a 0 at the end of a number after the decimal and it doesn't change the value. So 0 minus 6 is not 6. So what you're going to need to do here is borrow from the next number. So 10 minus 6 is 4. Here we've got 8 minus 7. That is 1. We can't do 4 minus 8, so we need to borrow here from the 4. 14 minus 8 is 6. Here's my decimal point. 3 minus 3 is 0. And 5 minus 0 is 5. So my answer would be 50 and 614 thousandths. So just be careful with this part here. If you have an empty space up above, you can't just drop down the number. If you put a 6 here, that would be incorrect. You write in a 0 and then you borrow from the next number, so this becomes a 10. Let's try another example. So sometimes you will see word problems such as this one. Sally has $75. Billy has $38.49 and got another $25 for his birthday. Who has more money and how much more do they have? So there's a couple of steps that need to be followed here. First of all, we don't know how much Billy has in total. So why don't you go ahead and try to figure that out first. Pause the video, come back when you're ready. I can get Billy's total by adding up the two amounts that he has. So I had to do an addition first, and I found out that Billy has $63.49. So obviously, Sally still has more. Now to find out how much more she has, I could subtract Billy's amount from Sally's amount. So in order to do that, I run into a little problem here. I have got zeros, and I can't take away from zeros, so I need to borrow. And since I can't borrow from this 0, I have to go one space over and borrow starting with the 5. So that 5 will turn into a 4. This 0 will turn into a 10. When I borrow from it though, it'll turn into a 9. And this first 0 will turn into a 10. So here I've got 10 minus 9, which is 1. I've got 9 minus 4, which is 5. I've got my decimal point here. I've got 4 minus 3, which is 1, and 7 minus 6, which is 1. So the difference between Sally's amount and Billy's amount is $11.51. Now that I've done that, I haven't quite finished. I have to answer the question with a complete sentence because I've been asked in the word problem as a sentence. So my final answer says, Sally has $11.51 more than Billy. In this lesson, you learned how to subtract decimals. You learned that the key word that tells you are subtracting is the word difference, which you will sometimes see in the questions. You also learned that if you are subtracting and you have an empty space up above a number, you need to write in a 0 and then borrow to turn that 0 into a 10. Don't just drop down that number, because if you do, you are going to be incorrect. And you also learn that you have to line up your numbers by lining up the decimal points just like when you added. You learn that sometimes in word problems, you may have to complete more than one step. So it's important that you understand what the question is asking you and understand what you need to do. In this question, it was first necessary to add two numbers to get Billy's total amount of money that he has, and then a subtraction was needed in the next part of the question. Sometimes it becomes tricky when you have a bunch of zeros at the end of the number at the top when you are subtracting, and there's a proper way to borrow in order to subtract. And finally, when you are asked as a word problem in a sentence, you have to make sure that you answer in a sentence as well. This is only one strategy for subtracting, and it's probably the most common one that people use to subtract, but it's not the only one. So if you have another one that works, by all means use it. And don't forget that you can also use estimating to check your answers to see if they are reasonable. So in this case, I don't really need to do any rounding with the 75 because it's already a nice easy number to work with. The 63 I rounded to the nearest whole number or the nearest dollar, which keeps it at 63. And I know that 75 minus 63 is 12. So I see that my answer is reasonable because it is close to my estimate. So you learned this strategy already in the previous lesson about adding decimals. So have fun subtracting decimals, and watch the video again and ask your teacher for help if you need it.